Imagine managing your digital ad campaigns without juggling 5 separate platforms. With Ribeye, planning, buying, reporting, measuring, and optimizing all come together in one seamless solution. Whether you're tapping into the open internet or navigating the walled gardens, Ribeye delivers full transparency into your supply, pricing, and performance. No more wasted ad spend, no more fragmented data, just faster decisions and better results. Elevate your ad game and carve out your prime cut of success today with Ribeye.
What do planking, Gangnam Style, hashtags, and viewability have in common? They were all popular in 2012, but while the first 3 fizzled out, viewability has lingered. Adelaide thinks it's time to retire that relic. That's why they created AU, a modern metric you can use to plan, buy, optimize, and even trade media. Adweek calls AU the attention economy's most widely recognized metric, and it swept the measurement category at last year's Ads Exchanger Awards. Don't get stuck with a fanny pack of metrics. Ask your agency about switching to AU. You can also visit AdelaideMetrics.com. That's AdelaideMetrics.com. Welcome to the eMarketer podcast. I'm Ari Paparo. I'm joined by Eric Franchi, and our special guest today is Ross Benesch, who is a senior analyst at eMarketer. Probably everyone who's listening to this has used his data in some form. He's also an author, has a new book coming out, so we're excited to talk to him. We have a couple of announcements. So first is we have a bunch of new websites. So eMarketer.tv is our main website and now includes all of our video content, the subscription and the free video content, as well as all of my newsletters. Previously, they were kind of on separate websites. It was a little confusing. Shouldn't make any change to your lives. I'd suggest going there and becoming a subscriber. Secondly, we have a new website called therefreshnews.com, and that's where all of AdTech God's newsletters are. So he had previously been at a different domain, and now it's all in one spot. We also have great social content under The Refresh, and it's very refreshing. And then finally, we have a new set of speakers and content for Marketecture Live. So Eric will be on stage with Brett Wilson talking to the hottest startups in AI. So Eric, why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, this is going to be awesome. So it's the Marketecture Live Startup Showcase. Brett, who we had on a couple of weeks ago, he was the former founder and CEO of TubeMogul, took a break from ad tech. Now he's back and investing in AI and ad tech startups. We're both going to be moderating 6 startups who are going to be doing little mini pitches and showing what the future is going to be. So we've got some familiar names like our portfolio company Chalice, who's doing some very interesting things, but also a bunch of brand new companies nobody's ever seen before, like Gumshoe AI. They're one of these SEO for LLM companies, some really interesting companies that are doing things with video like Creatify. It's going to be neat. Like the submissions were awesome. It was really hard narrowing it down. The presentations, I think, are going to be fantastic. It's going to be hopefully a highlight of the day.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. And I sent out an email to the mailing list talking about this today, and I accidentally didn't put a URL on the register button. So if you got an email and clicked register and nothing happened, I would just encourage you to type in marketecturelive.com because, no one's perfect and the register button was broken.
Are there any tickets left, Art?
Vanishingly few. So hit that register button.
Buy those tickets.
All right, let's get into it with Ross. All right, and we're here with Ross Benesch, who is the senior analyst for eMarketer for over 7 years. He's an author of several books, and probably most of the people listening to this have heard of him or have cut and paste charts he's created to put into their PowerPoints. So, Ross, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, great to be here.
So I wanted to have you on for just like generally thinking about eMarketer as like this pillar that holds up so much stuff in our industry, so much analysis, business plans, et cetera. Everyone knows the brand, the red color is like ingrained into our brains. Like, what is eMarketer?
Well, just a market research company that creates a lot of data and charts that you guys love to use.
True. Like, what's the state of the company? Who owns it? How big is it?
Well, Axel Springer owns it, and we merged with Business Insider Intelligence a few years ago. And then we became Insider Intelligence. Now we rebranded back to eMarketer. It's a few hundred people work for us, and we're kind of all over right now. I mean, New York is the base and the headquarters, but we have employees all over the US. We have forecasters in Argentina. We have some editors in the Philippines. We have an office in the UK with a lot of people. So, it's become more global, I would say, in the 7 years I've been here.
Right. To what extent is it, I want to hear about your methods. Is it original research? Is it piggybacking off other people's estimates and then sort of normalizing? What does it look like a day in the life?
That depends a lot on what statistic you're looking at and what data is available. Some statistics, there's just a plethora of existing research, and we can kind of just do a meta-analysis of that. But then others, especially when you're doing a forecast for the first time, or it's one that changes a lot per year, like the upfronts, I'll do like a lot of interviews for the forecast, like on background interviews. We'll use other estimates too, but those might be driven by like what we find talking to people. So some of the forecasts have like a lot of sources pegged to them. Some of them have a few that they're based on. It really depends what's out in the marketplace and how mature that metric is. So like when we do it for the first time, it doesn't have as much data in it as it does, when we do it for the fifth time.
One of the things I really appreciate about eMarketer is the footnotes, because you explain exactly what the data means. Whether you're right or not is a totally different question. But there are plenty of folks who say like programmatic's a $100 billion market. And what do they mean by programmatic? That could be anything. And you folks actually say what you mean on each graph, which is highly appreciated.
Well, I appreciate that because me and other analysts spend a lot of time writing those little notes, and they're not like, normal English sentences. It's very technical terms to try to make them as truncated as possible so it can fit there, even though it still might take up half the damn chart.
Ross, people throw around stats all the time and they never cite them. And oftentimes they're wrong, right? So whether it's the total size of the ad market, the size of programmatic, search, CTV, what do you hear people getting most wrong when they're out there just like quoting stats about the size of the market or growth?
That's a good, well, so, I cover TV, so a lot of my bias is going to be like in stats on that. But I've heard, people say that spending on CTV is going to exceed linear. Like I've heard them say that, and it will one day, but like not now.
What are the relative numbers on that?
Linear is still more than double CTV.
That's like
ads
30 and 70, right?
Yeah. CTV is declining. It's probably a little closer to 60 now, just because every year erodes a little bit. But like it will get there. But I've seen, or sometimes you'll hear like spending on CTV content is exceeding linear. You might hear that. But that's kind of a misnomer because a lot of the content that's coming to streaming is paid for by linear companies. Think of all those CBS shows that are on Paramount and all the shows produced by NBC that find their way on Peacock. They're not necessarily streaming shows. They just happen to be on the service.
How do you resist being a, reply guy every time you see this stuff?
Well, I got things to do, otherwise I'd just be sitting there doing that all day. The one time I became a reply guy was Disney had this stat, I think it was last year. They said that Disney subscribers exceeded Netflix, but that was counting Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus, and not even take into effect that one individual could do all three if you have the bundle. So sometimes you're counting one person 3 times.
Yeah, that's not
and so
cool.
many news publications just ran that Disney's exceeded Netflix in subscribers, and not at all, not even close. That one, I did do some press interviews and send some haughty tweets, but normally I just try to chill out because I know it'll blow over eventually.
All right, what's the opposite? What have you published that got people the angriest?
I feel like I got people a lot angrier at Digiday than I have at eMarketer because I was a lot more antagonistic. Just any story naming a name that had to deal with ad fraud would
sure
get people the angriest.
Okay, I guess
eMarketer, there's a lot less hostility.
What's the most debatable statistic, though? What's the one where there's a wide variety of views about what the actual number is?
Well, programmatic ad spending in general, we take a wide view of it. So our numbers are going to come in higher. Whether we'd be looking at total programmatic or programmatic CTV, we're going to estimate over 80% because we're saying any automation. But some places are going to say, like, if you're just using automation for the ad fulfillment or you're doing programmatic guaranteed, that's not really programmatic. So if you remove all that, then the number is a lot different. but that's just basically our real-time bidding estimate. So it comes down to terminology more so.
No, I appreciate that. Those are where the footnotes come in. I want to spend a little time on this. Let's do a little TAM exercise. Let's start with advertising. How big is the advertising business globally ex-China? Because the number I've heard is $1 trillion. It's $1 trillion for every ad. That does include marketing. It does include like billboards and, radio ads in Africa or whatever. I think like Sir Martin probably throws around the billion number and the trillion number.
Yeah, I think we've said this on the pod.
Yeah, I think we have, but I don't know if we have any. We don't have footnotes on the pod.
Never.
You can't.
Clearly.
We get fact checked a lot.
We have total ads. I'm trying to find the. We have it by all these countries. I'm trying to find the exact metric. So you said total media spending. So this includes traditional. This isn't just digital. We have it actually pretty close to that. We have it at 948 billion.
Right.
So
what's 60 billion here and there? It's fine.
Well, actually, that's last year. So it does cross $1 trillion this year.
Let's narrow a little bit. Maybe you don't have this number. I don't have this number. What's the digital?
Yeah, it's widely said it's like, basically 700.
700 billion of the trillion is digital?
That's what I've heard.
That seems high to me.
Between 600 and 700, yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard that a bunch of times.
It was 689 last year and 776 this year. So actually right with what Eric's just repeating eMarketer stats that someone told him.
That's part of the problem. Okay, let's go.
We're just parroting into each other.
Okay, let's talk about, so you define programmatic as anything that doesn't involve a human, more or less, like anything where an algorithm is determining where the ads show. What's your estimate for the programmatic, if you have global or if you have US?
Here, we'll go US. So programmatic this year, 181 billion for that, and that's like 90% of the market. Now,
90% what market?
Digital ad spending in the US. But half of that is social.
Yes. So your definition, you can think of it as cutting it two ways. First way you could cut it is display versus search or other formats, right? And so you remove Google search as this giant number. And then the second way you could cut it is programmatic versus non-programmatic.
It's true. It's 90% of display. Yeah.
90% of display is, what was the number? 180 billion? Okay. Now let's talk about what is probably the most relevant for this audience, which is RTB. So we're taking out social or walled gardens. What's the number there?
Yeah. So if you just have real-time bidding, the total is about 44 billion.
In the US. Interesting.
Yeah, in the US.
So let's analyze that number a little bit. So basically, this is better than having an eMarketer subscription, just having you on the pod. Okay, so
a wave of cancellations are coming.
Oh, God.
All right, so 44 billion. So here's what I think is really interesting. And I've written about this and people have talked about this, which is if you think about the opportunity for a company like the Trade Desk, which recently in the public markets has taken a shellacking, their media spend, the amount of money that goes through their pipes, I think was estimated at somewhere like 12 to 14 billion. So is it fair to say that, assuming it's all US, let's forget international for a second, that 12 divided by 44 is 27% market share?
So our real-time bidding is just open exchange and private marketplace. It doesn't include programmatic guaranteed. The Trade Desk is going to be involved in some programmatic guaranteed. So that figure would probably be a little lower than what you're estimating if we did create that statistic.
Right. Okay. So their market share would be lower.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you, and now throw in international, especially Europe, and so you end up with the Trade Desk market share maybe being 20% of programmatic, and yet they're by far the leader in the space. And so it kind of brings up this question about who's got everything else.
Well, the leader
is Google, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but we know Google's, because of the antitrust suit, we know Google's not much bigger than that. Their total media spend through DV360 was only about 10 billion a couple years ago, so it's probably not much more than that. So it feels still very fragmented. Either your estimates are too high, which is possible, or it's more fragmented than we think in terms of where the media spend originates in RTB.
Well, there's a lot of companies in the Lumascape. I mean, they have to be making something, right? I mean, we talk about fragmented, so there's a lot of share going to your OpenX's and Index Exchange and so on and so forth.
Sure. Although that's the sell side. So,
you know what I mean. These names all change. I was going to say Magnite, but
I appreciate you helping me through that exercise. This is absolutely what the only reason I wanted to have you on was to have that analysis. But let's get back to business. So let's talk about what it's like.
Amazon would be another big part of that too. Yeah. Okay.
What's it like working at eMarketer? Do you see your charts in weird places? Like, do you go to a cocktail party and someone's talking about some weird stat that they saw and you can trace it back?
Well, thankfully, no one talks to me about this at cocktail parties. My cocktail party conversation is more about Juggalos and pro wrestling. But
we're gonna get to the Juggalo part.
You do see it in weird places. Sometimes it's attributed, sometimes not, and you'll see a stat put out there that you help create, or you put the chart out, and it'll be on some random blog, sometimes almost word for word saying what you're saying. But I've been at conferences and someone will put it, they'll just have a slide on there, and they might even recreate it themselves. It might not be in our black and red and white outlay, but it'll be our forecast, and it's pretty prevalent. Even on Twitter, there'll just be random guys tweeting stuff that probably don't even know who I am, and I'll be like, oh, I made that chart.
There's a lot of that going around. There's also this whole world of SEO spammers that take real data from companies like yours and then create a web page in front of you. There are people who try to get the SEO juice so people don't have to pay for a subscription from you and things like that.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing.
Eric, what percentage of pitch decks have an eMarketer chart in them that come your way?
100%.
100%.
Yeah, 100%. Just which is why I was oddly accurate on especially the TAM size, because it's a slide in every deck. And I think it's generally attributed, right? Because, these are documents that they're out, for talking to investors. So I usually see them coming back to eMarketer.
I think if someone's putting in a pitch deck that attribute it, and if they're a client, it's easier to just grab the image itself, which would have the attribution in the chart. That's a lot different use case than someone trying to get SEO with a blog of analysis they never did and ripped off.
So you sent us some interesting analysis about retail media and what's going on there. Do you want to talk about what your latest findings are there?
Sure. And I'm not the retail media analyst, so I'm ripping off Sarah Manzano and Sky and Blake, but so I'm just giving a shout out to
this one chart has a 7-line footnote on it. I'm very impressed by that.
Which chart is that? The one about the gap between
the gap?
Yeah. So one finding is just that if we go back a few years ago, the majority of retail media ad spending, well, it still is the majority, but by far the most was search. And search was almost 50% higher than display dollars. And this is looking outside of Amazon. And now the search and display are pretty similar. So, all these apps that have jammed retail media networks into them have seen their display grow a lot faster than their search. The search has just kind of been steady, and now they have all this display because they're serving ads where people are spending time within the app.
Does display include ads that are showing product? It's like the product listing ads?
I believe it does.
All right. I'll have to read the 7-line footnote.
If you extrapolate the spend, I think it has to include the sponsored listings.
Right. Yeah, it has to, because there's not a lot of banner ads going on in e-commerce apps and sites. But I thought it was more interesting that we've talked on this show before about the problems in commerce media, how it's very fragmented outside of Amazon. But you showed us a kind of shocking chart about that.
Amazon is 3/4 of the market still, and there's we estimate about 80 retail media networks now. I mean, everyone's become an ad network is kind of the joke, but they only account for 15% of the market. So you have Amazon's 3/4, Walmart is pretty big, and then you got just dozens of companies fighting for between 1/10 and 1/5 of the market.
Are you tracking the progress of Wawa?
Wawa would be one of those, but it's not. It did not make the cut. It's not as significant as Target, but their sandwiches are adequate.
Yeah, it's really surprising that Wawa's not bigger given their share of podcast discussion. What about AI?
Is this podcast brought to you by Wawa?
It could be. If anyone from Wawa is listening, we'll take your money. But what about AI? Are you looking into that at all?
We have a lot of so AI is pretty interdisciplinary right now. We have a VP who is focused on AI within the company, like using AI to streamline processes, using it to like write emails or briefings. So we have the internal use of AI, but of course we're looking at it external. Max Willens wrote a report on AI disrupting media buying. It's kind of in every area. So whether you're a retail analyst or the programmatic person or the CTV person, or even if you're like on the other side of the company covering finance, you have to be cognizant of it in some way. But, that strategy is going to evolve a lot, I'm sure. And we'll only have probably more forecasts on that over time. But you got to be kind of cautious and not just buy the hype and say this is going to be $1 trillion immediately.
Yeah, I mean, because there's two things, right? It's to your point, the use of AI that's transforming, much of the advertising stack. But then there's like the advertising format that is kind of yet to be built, but we're starting to see some of the emergence of it. We'll even see it, a couple weeks from now at Marketer Live of like, what an LLM based ad looks like. How large does a market need to be for eMarketer to start tracking it?
That's a great question. It's not, I don't know if there's like a particular size, because we've tracked some kind of small markets if there's enough interest in it, like programmatic podcast ad spending, which relates to this thing you're listening to. If you guys want to jam in an ad in the middle, it's not that big of a market. It's
is it 500 million?
The total podcast market was estimated by the IAB to be $2 billion last year. It's maybe a little bigger now, but the programmatic portion of that's probably de minimis.
Yeah, so programmatic, it's 270 million.
Very small.
Yeah, so it's a podcast already a fragment of digital audio, and they're growing certainly, but they're not the majority. Most digital audio is still people listening to Spotify and Pandora and iHeart, and then programmatic is a sliver of that. But we forecast it because clients are interested in it, and it's a growing market. So that's kind of one of the smaller ones we would do. But if it's under 100 million, that's a tough pitch to get the resources and build out an annual forecast for.
As a side note, The Information just published a deep article on Spotify's troubles. So that's worth reading if you have a subscription to The Information. So let's talk about your secret life or your other life as a author. So many people who are listening to this may not know that Ross has published, was it 2 books?
This is my 4th one.
4th books. Oh my God. The latest one is called 1999, The Year Low Culture Captured America. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, the premise is just that the trashy 90s are shaping our world in all sorts of weird and interesting ways. And so I see like the heyday of Beanie Babies reminiscent in some of these meme coins and NFTs that blow up in value and then suddenly decelerate. Pro wrestling is in the White House. We got a WWE Hall of Famer, and Secretary of Education, soon to be, was former pro wrestling CEO, and Jerry Springer is with us in all these ways that people fight with each other online or in reality TV or even in congressional hearings. And I see the moral panic of 90s video games resurfacing with the moral panic of TikTok right now. Congressional leaders talk about TikTok the way they talked about Doom in 1999, causing all kinds of irreparable harms to children. So I looked at the trashiest stuff that I loved as a kid, and I connected it to what's going on in our world today.
It's fascinating. And there's a reality TV show star who's the president now. Similar related. How do you find the time?
It's tough, and it's getting tougher because I'm about to have like my second kid in a few weeks. And I don't know if I will continue to find the time, but I've devoted a lot of nights and weekends to watching 20-part documentary series on Monday Night Pro Wrestling ratings, which my wife would probably wish I would do something else with my time.
So the Insane Clown Posse, we have to bring this up. So you're a member of this posse?
Well, there's only 2 members of the posse. Violent J and Shaggy 2 Dope. You can call me a Juggalo if you wish.
I would like to.
Okay, I'm fine with that. I don't know if I'm as intense. I don't have any hatchet gear other than the shirt I'm wearing, and I got this off of Temu, which I don't know if that counts. So I like the Insane Clown Posse. I'm fascinated by them. I've written about them for business journals, culture magazines, all sorts of places. I think they get more out of less than any other entertainer in the world. I mean, they have a career of like 30 years going off of just appealing to a few thousand fans intensely. So my love isn't ironic, but I'm also like, I've never been to The Gathering. I'm not like super intense about it, but like if the Great Malenko album comes on, like I turn that shit up.
All right. The Gathering. I've heard about The Gathering. It's similar to like what the Boy Scouts have when they all go to like the mountains.
That's an interesting way of putting it.
One other Ross factoid for the listeners. If you do a Google search, I want to say the title is the oral history of the Lumascape on Digiday. That was a really good piece. We're just doing like some quick research on your background. Like that was the first result that came up, and it was really good. So for a lot of the folks that are, somewhat new to the industry and want to hear how this, set of landscape documents were created and the impact it had, you should check it out.
One other one I did that was ridiculous at Digiday, and I appreciate that shout out, was the oral history of header bidding. And it wasn't even header bidding as it became used. It was just why that buzzword was chosen as the term for it. It was like 2,000 words on the lexicon of ad tech jargon.
I've referred to that article many times. I'm pretty familiar with it. All right, well, let's call it there and we will come back. So we've renamed our second session. It's no longer News of the Week. It's now The Refresh, because eMarketer also publishes a newsletter called The Refresh at therefreshnews.com. And we also have The Refresh on social, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. So you should check out eMarketer on those platforms. But we will be back with Eric and I, as well as Ross, talking about news that happened this week under the brand The Refresh. This podcast is brought to you by Sojourn. Thinking about how to get more out of your travel marketing? Sojourn's travel audiences tap into real-time data from top hotels, airlines, and more, so you can reach the right travelers at the right time. Whether you're running programmatic or social ads, Sojourn's AI-powered audiences plug right into your DSP for better performance. Test Sojourn's travel data to take your campaigns further. Learn more at sojourn.com/marketecture. That's SOJERN.com/marketecture.
All right, we're back with The Refresh. Do you know why it's called The Refresh, Ari?
I made up the name. I'm good at naming things.
Oh, I thought it was a shout out to Kramer on that Seinfeld episode where he was obsessed with the Junior Mints.
Wow, that's a deep
they're
cut.
very refreshing.
No, it was sort of an ad tech joke because people do refreshes to get more ads. I'm a pretty modest guy. I won't say I'm good at X very often. The one thing I'm very good at is naming things. So.
I like it. Okay, second week in a row, your DMs were flooded with corrections, amplifications, updates. Why don't you take us through?
Yeah, let's make it quick here. So last week's pod, we talked to Christoph of Analytics. We got a ton of feedback, and then following up, both AdTech Explained and the Monopoly Report talked about that as well this week. So we're really flooding the zone on Christoph. Anyway, Christoph felt really bad that he did not give enough credit to Ariel Garcia of Check My Ads, who was very involved in the CSAM investigation. So he really asked us to make sure that we gave Ariel her due credit. I also owe Ariel a lot of credit for the work she's done at the DOJ. So keep up the good work, and thank you for that. Secondly, Double Verify reached out because during that show, I mentioned that Double Verify had written a rebuttal to Analytics a couple weeks earlier, and Double Verify wanted to be very clear that that had nothing to do with the CSAM. They were fully supportive of the CSAM work, and that the rebuttal was other work Analytics has done. So I just want to make that clear in case anyone thought Double Verify was being defensive about the CSAM stuff. And lastly, there's this report that YouTube is 10% of all media watching, and the YouTube people have been saying that does not include YouTube TV, but it might actually include YouTube TV. Listener Doug Laurento pointed us to some footnotes again in the report that says it does include YouTube TV. So I'm just going to leave this as I'm a little confused as to what it includes or not, because the YouTube people are kind of confused. Everyone's confused. I think it includes YouTube TV, but they don't.
Hold up. This is a job for literally one person, and we have that person on the pod right now. Ross Benesh, answer this. How much of TV watching is YouTube?
About 10%. And if we're looking at the Nielsen gauge, I believe the Nielsen gauge does exclude YouTube TV because it just says YouTube main. But that's if you're looking at the Nielsen gauge. I don't know if you guys are looking at a different study, but the Nielsen gauge would show 10% of all television watching is YouTube main. Or were you guys looking at a different study, though?
I don't know.
We'll leave this to the readers to understand.
Yeah, find it out in the comments. Okay. We have something you grabbed that was late breaking yesterday. So X is apparently pushing IPG to spend more, allegedly, on the platform because IPG is apparently caught in the crosshairs of this whole Trump admin backlash. Walk us through this.
Yeah, I don't want to get too political here, but there seems to be a pattern. The Trump administration has been shaking down Paramount for a very large amount of money. Basically, the Trump administration is suing Paramount because they believe that the CBS program 60 Minutes cut the Kamala interview to be more pro-Kamala, which is an insane lawsuit. I mean, it makes no sense. But because Paramount is trying to merge right now, it's under the thumb of the regulators, and effectively what's going on is some sort of quid pro quo where Paramount's going to have to settle the lawsuit, pay $10 or $20 million to Trump in order to get their merger approved. Now, a second instance, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that a lawyer for X called up a lawyer from IPG and said, more or less, it'd be a real shame if your merger didn't go through. Maybe you should spend more money on X. And, that's the world we're living in. It's alleged. It's the Wall Street Journal reporting it. The Wall Street Journal said multiple sources confirm this. Yeah, it's like not a great situation.
That seems bizarre. How much does IPG's spend account for X's potential spend? And like, how important is that?
I mean, they're a big holding company, right? And Apple recently decided to go back on X with their spend. I don't think anyone thinks X is a great place to spend media. Doing a favor for the regime seems like it's a
pretty
idea.
Small place, too. Like the total spending on X is not much.
Big.
Yeah, it's not going to affect your media budget a ton if you do go back.
Yeah, fair point. That's weird. Okay, let's get back to ad tech. On the heels of the Christoph episode, DV came out with a post that I thought was really good and worth talking about increasing their safeguards around CSAM. And we'll point to it in the notes in the newsletter. But basically, they, brought this safeguard approach out for the industry. It's got 3 points. So it's number one, obviously, like labeling CSAM and high risk content and make it a category that is enabled by default to avoid running ads on. Number two, completely avoiding the P2P sharing and streaming category. And then number three, have an ongoing collaboration with law enforcement and child safety organizations. So I thought this was a really good response to the piece that Analytics came out.
Yeah, I mean, they have to be proactive. If they just sit around getting haymakers from all sides, it's not great for their business. So it's good to see them being proactive, doing something, and not being too cautious.
And, they were the one that did it. I didn't see any other brand safety vendors or anyone else come out with any solutions.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're definitely positioning themselves as the clear leader in the space, despite their, drawbacks or negatives. IS seems strangely quiet on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I guess that's a strategy, perhaps. Moving on. So let's talk about CTV. And your chart, Ross, made its way into a semi-viral X thread. So his username, Tom Lee, I guess he's an ex-Amazon guy. He pointed out that after Amazon Prime Video started enabling ads by default about a year ago, there's been a flood of inventory that's had meaningful impact on CTV CPMs. So it's interesting. They didn't really point to averages in general, but, just taking a look here, Netflix CPMs a year ago were averaging $42. Now they're $31. Amazon Prime Video itself was like $35. Now it's $28. So there's certainly some equilibrium happening in the market with pricing and supply. I thought this was pretty interesting.
Yeah, we've been seeing that for about a year now, where the inventory share has been increasing. Amazon's the biggest factor of that, but you have other factors too, like Netflix and Disney Plus and Max. Their ad product is getting more mature, and they're getting a lot more ad-supported viewers than they did right when they launched. So that's just a lot of additional inventory, and as that goes up, the average unit goes down. Total spending is going up though. So I just want to emphasize that these things kind of work, in different directions. If total spending goes up, that's good for the industry. The CPM is going to come down. It's cheaper to buy a 30-second spot than it used to be. And if more inventory floods, like if Netflix gets even more users converted to the ad-supported plan, you'd probably see ad prices decline even a little bit further.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting to keep an eye on because there's also the dynamic of all these new SMBs and performance-based advertisers starting to experiment with CTV. So, we could see real equilibrium if, we see just supply stabilization, more advertisers, the whole thing kind of.
And those SMBs aren't wanting to pay $40 CPMs too. They're going to be more comfortable if the CPMs are where they are now, or if they even decline a little bit. They're probably a little discouraged, 2 years ago, but now Disney and others have cheaper inventory that's more in their ballpark.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, this is one that you flagged. So apparently, and this is like big news, apparently Netflix could be bidding for the Sunday afternoon NFL games, which is huge from a watch standpoint. 72 of the top 100 most watched broadcasts of 24 were NFL games.
Yeah, so this is sort of true but exaggerated. So what happened was that a senior executive from Netflix went on the podcast The Town, which is about Hollywood, and the host asked her, what content would you love to have the most? And she said Sunday NFL, and it kind of got a life of its own that they were going to be aggressively bidding on it, which doesn't appear to actually be true. And Rich from Lightshed, who's a friend of the pod, wrote a good blog post kind of throwing some water on this. But the facts are that the NFL has an opt-out of their current deals. I think it's been reported as 2029 and other people have reported as 2030, but I think it's the 2029 season and it's right after the 2030 Super Bowl that the NFL can opt out of its current contracts and renegotiate, which would throw Netflix and others into the mix to some extent. I think there's no doubt they'd be involved. I mean, they're already owning some rights. So I think there's a glimmer, more than a glimmer of truth to this, but the actual news cycle around it has been a little exaggerated.
Well, Netflix in their last earnings call made a point to say that they're not going to be bidding on any, big sports rights in the foreseeable future. But what I said in my statement after the call is that they have a habit of doing the exact thing that they said they wouldn't do, like having ads and cracking down on password sharing and, having live sports to begin with. So like when they say they're not going to do something, I fully expect them to do so within a few years. The reason they're not going to bid on anything really major in the next 6 months probably is because there isn't a lot up for renewal. None of the big ticket items are up, like they're all locked up. So 5 years from now, it would make sense for them to bid on this, but that's a long time, really.
Okay, moving on. We talked about this a little bit in the previous segment, but I just want to give a shout out to Ryan Barwick from Morning Brew. He pointed out that Walmart's ads business is now $4.4 billion, and it grew 27% year over year. So this is the clear number 2 in the category. I guess going back to you, Russ, do you see this, effectively duopoly of Amazon and Walmart continuing, or just because there's, to your point, 80 RMNs that you track, probably a heck of a lot more if you're still good on the long tail. Do you see this at all balancing out over time?
Well, you're still going to have a duopoly where the majority is going to go to 2 companies. Right now, it's 80%. That share might shrink to like 60 eventually. So what I'm saying is the rest of the market is going to grow faster because they're starting from a smaller base. And it's 80 companies and probably be 100 within a year or two. But they have a long way to go. So it's going to be a long time before 51% doesn't go to Walmart and Amazon combined.
Yeah, that makes sense. What's the total size of the retail media market?
$63 billion.
$63 billion market.
In the United States.
Cool. Awesome. So it's a big market. All right. Ari, who is behind the movement for the open web? And have you heard of them prior to today?
The movement for the open web, I think, I don't want to say something incorrect, right? But I think this is a group that's been in the UK for a while and that was started. I had an outreach from a guy there's this cross-device company called like 13 Bells or something. It has a really weird name like that, like 23 something. It's not 23, 33 across. It's a number and then a word. And they've been doing like cross-device stuff for a long time. And the CEO reaches out to me to get me involved in this thing. And I'm pretty sure that's what Movement for the Open Web is. And it's basically an anti-Google consortium.
It's conspicuously no names on the website. So that's the reason why I asked. So maybe that's not a conspiracy, unfortunately.
So it's like the ad tech stonecutters. Is that like what we're going for?
I guess. What do you mean by that?
Well, the stonecutters are a parody by The Simpsons of the Freemasons. So like a secret society that runs the world, but they don't know who's in it.
What is a conspiracy if not just like an organized plan with a bunch of people?
Okay, so it is a conspiracy.
No, I will spill some tea here. Okay, it is James Rosewell is the founder. He was the founder of 51 Degrees. I knew I had it sort of vaguely deep in my memory. 51 Degrees is a cross-device data company that's been around for a while.
It's not half of a 90s boy band.
Not exactly half, rounding error.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So that's the origin. Like I said, it's a UK based kind of vehemently anti-Google lobbying group, and they've been very involved in like trying to get the W3C to not approve any of the sandbox stuff, and otherwise just being advocates for what's the opposite of being an advocate? Someone who's against Google.
An opponent.
Yeah, thanks.
Anyway, they came out swinging. Thank you. That was great. No longer a conspiracy. They came out swinging against Sandbox, basically claiming that it doesn't work. And Google themselves said it doesn't work based on a post that lagged that Sandbox was inaccurate by a wide margin versus cookies in attribution reporting.
Yeah, so not a lot of ink has been spilled on the reporting Sandbox APIs. Everyone in our little universes focus on PAPI, which is kind of like the targeting part. I haven't spent a lot of time on the reporting part either. So it's interesting in that it's really just quoting from a Google report that's a couple months old. But I'd love to hear more from experts on reporting and how it's going.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, this has been an awesome episode. Do you want to cut it here, or anything else you want to slide in? Cool.
No, this is great. The new refresh is going swimmingly. So, Ross, thank you so much for being here. It's super interesting. Why don't you plug your book one more time?
1999, the year a low culture conquered America and kickstarted our bizarre times. You'll learn a lot of fun facts, like Jerry Springer was the first show ever recorded on TiVo.
All right. Anywhere your books are sold, right?
Yep, exactly.
All right, Eric, always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. We'll see you next week, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you for subscribing to Marketecture. New interviews are added every week at marketecture.tv and your favorite podcasting app.
Thank you for listening to the Marketecture podcast. New episodes come out every Friday, and an insightful vendor interview is published each Monday. You can subscribe to our library of hundreds of executive interviews at marketecture.tv. You can also sign up for free for our weekly newsletter with my original strategic insights on the week's news at news.marketecture.tv. And if you're feeling social, we operate a vibrant Slack community that you can apply to join at adtechgod.com.